That red light's on, it should start. That zooms in, that zooms out. Got it? Okay, so we're studying Cnidarians. So a Cnidarian is, like I said, a soft-bodied organism with tentacles. And they come in all different shapes and sizes and kinds. You've heard of sea anemones. You've heard of jellyfish. You've heard of coral. These, a hydra. You ever heard of a hydra? A Portuguese man-o'-war. Heard of that? These are all in the same big group. It's phylum Cnidaria. Phylum Cnidaria. And so there's a whole bunch of different kinds. There's some very. Look at the giant green anemone. Let me see that with the light on. Wow. Jellyfish. There's a coral. You've probably seen a coral reef or pictures of it. And hydras are related to these real small organisms that can grab food. And all of these are animals, and so they eat. It was first thought that these things, like anemones, were plants because they were stuck to one position, and it kind of looked a little like a plant. But once they were studied, it was found out that these things eat. They don't do photosynthesis. Now, a lot of the coral have algae living with them, and the algae do photosynthesis in the daytime and give some of the food to the coral. And in exchange, the coral kind of protects the algae, gives it a place to live. So you know what we call that type of relationship when two organisms working together?
Symbiotic.
Symbiotic relationship. It's called mutualism, helping out each other. So this is showing the little stinging cells. So this is what the cell looks like. Now again, these things are microscopic. There's usually a little trigger on it. If you hit the trigger, the top opens up. And this little device in here comes shooting out. And you can see the little device has a line on it, you see. And it comes shooting out and will stab something. And so if you've ever, how many here, raise your hand if you've been stung by a jellyfish? Many. So doesn't it feel like it's tingling as well as painful? And it's not like in a single location, but it's a little spread out.
It's like when your leg falls asleep.
Kind of like when your leg falls asleep. That's right, yeah. Well, when one of those tentacles hits you, it's not just one stinger going into you, it's thousands. So that's why it's spread out. And that's enough to kill a small organism. And then what the Cnidarian will do is pull the organism in with its tentacles into its mouth.
Portuguese man-o'-war could kill people.
Portuguese man-o'-war could kill you. Yeah.
And box jellyfish.
People in a box jellyfish, there are some that's strong enough poison to kill you. But usually what they're doing when a big organism comes to get them is they're just defending themselves so they won't get eaten. If you touch that jellyfish and it stings you, you're probably going to stay away from it. And that keeps the jellyfish safe. Jellyfish, seeing that they're made of jelly, they're very don't have much defense except for their stings. If you're immune to the sting, you could just gobble it up. There are some things immune to the stings. Certain types of fish. Clownfish. Clownfish, Nemo, is immune to the stings. So he just lives amongst the tentacles of the sea anemone. So here's the tentacles. Now there's two body types you need to know. The type when the body has the tentacles pointing up is called the polyp form. And the type with the tentacles pointing down is called the medusa form. Jellyfish are medusa form as adults. Coral and sea anemones are polyp form as adults. A lot of these organisms can regenerate by budding. See that little thing buds off? For a jellyfish, in the life cycle of a jellyfish, they look like this as larvae. And they just bud off one after another that flips over and grows into the adult. So you can have hundreds of these things budding off and forming many adult jellyfish. Isn't that cool? You can see their tentacles there. Those are the things that are covered with those cnidocytes. They have the mouth. In the mouth, they take food in through the mouth, and it goes into this digestive cavity. They're calling it a cnidarian. It's also called a gastrovascular cavity. I'm not sure what I use in, yep, there it is. Cnidarian or a gastrovascular cavity. And so that's where the food goes. So food goes in here, it's digested in there, and then the waste come back out the same opening. It's like their poop comes out their mouth. They have really bad breath. That's a simple form of a digestive system. The earliest animals had that form of digestive system, that gastrovascular cavity. A more complex digestive system would be if you had another opening at the other end, and the food went in one end and came out the other. Then you can keep eating while you're excreting. That's a more complicated form. That's the form we have. You know what organism invented that form? Mouth open on one end. Mouth on one end, anus on the other. Worms.
I knew it. I said it first.
Good job, Tony. Let the record show Tony said it first.
Why are you roasting me now?
These things have two body layers, an outer cell layer called the ectoderm layer, and an inner cell layer called the endoderm layer. And in between those two layers, they have jelly. It's called mesoglea. Can you say mesoglea? Mesoglea. That's fun to say all at the same time? Mesoglea. It's a little jelly that's between the two layers. Now that's not living cells. It's stuff squirted out by the living cells to fill space. So these are two cell layers, creatures with two layers of cells. And jelly in between. The jellyfish has the same thing. An outer layer of cells, the ectoderm. An inner layer of cells, the endoderm. And jelly in between. The mouth is on the underside for a jellyfish. And the tentacles hang down. Sometimes these things will have stinging cells just on the tentacles, or sometimes they'll have stinging cells all over their body. It depends on the species. So some species you can touch the top of the jellyfish and not get stung. You only get stung if you touch the tentacles. Some species you get stung if you touch the top.
But if you were to touch the top of it, would it probably try to sting you? Do they get mad?
Oh, would the tentacles go up and sting you? Perhaps. I don't know. I've never tried that. It's a good question.
I wanted to try that.
Go experiment on that next time you see some jellyfish.
Not anytime again.
No? The stinging was too much?
Yeah, it really sucked.
They have a nerve net. They don't have a brain, they have a nerve net. They got a bunch of nerves going through their body. There's no central location where there's a whole bunch of nerves like our brain. It's just individual nerves all spread out that are connected to one another. But these are the earliest organisms that actually had a nervous system. If you touch a sponge, none of the other cells know it. There's no communication between cells in a sponge. But if you touch a cnidarian, all the rest of the cells are quickly informed with the nerve net. And the thing can make some sort of movement to either go sting you or run away or something. Whatever it's kind of programmed to do. It doesn't do much thinking. It's all pre-programmed in the DNA of the organism. So it might be programmed if it's touched here to whip its tentacles towards it. Or if it's touched in a lot of places at once to run away. I don't know. I don't know how the jellyfish programming works. But it's probably pretty complicated. So that's the nerve net. Well, okay, here's the reproduction. So like I said, there's a polyp form of a jellyfish, and then it will bud off something that looks like that. They're calling it an ephora. I never have heard that word before. This is the first time I've ever seen it. And that thing will grow into an adult jellyfish. Now the adult jellyfish are either male or female. And the jellyfish can reproduce with other jellyfish. A male and a female can reproduce together. The male releases sperm into the water. The female releases eggs into the water. And the sperm and eggs combine in the water. And it forms a larvae called a planula. And that larva swims around and lands somewhere and grows into a polyp. And that polyp gets stuck at the bottom of the ocean somewhere and will bud off jellyfish one by one. Little tiny ones that flip over and grow into big jellyfish over time. Some jellyfish they think live a real long time. I'm not sure exactly how long, but I think they found some of them that can live decades or even like 100 years. You might want to Google that. Someone Google how long does a jellyfish live? I don't know how good the research is on it. I thought I had heard that somewhere where they could live a real long time. You want to see some coral reproducing?
To create such a magnificent structure, corals ceaselessly grow and expand.
6 to 12 months.
That's it?
Yeah, that's what it says.
The
like
oldest
one.
one was 507 years.
500
Each
years?
species of coral synchronizes its spawning. It is one of nature's most prolific spectacles, and it happens on the same few nights each year. No one fully understands what signals the millions of coral polyps to spew their eggs and sperm into the currents in a single swirling display. By working together on an epic scale, these Cnidarians have found a way to guarantee their own rebirth.
Those are eggs. Bunch of eggs released into the water.
What do those eggs taste like?
I've never tasted them.
Coral. That'd be a delicacy.
So some coral will release a bunch of eggs into the water, other coral will release a bunch of sperm into the water, and then they'll the sperm and egg come together in the water. You need to know the different groups. The coral are called anthozoans. And there's a whole bunch of types. Now the coral have, what they do is they're little polyps creatures. Let me draw a little coral. Here's a little coral with its little tentacles. And what it'll do is it will secrete a shell around itself. So this coral secretes out of its skin a shell. You know what the shell's made of?
Calcium.
Calcium carbonate, which is shell material. That's a hard stuff. And now we have a coral living in a shell. Now, like I said, there's some algae living in there with it. And so the blue here is the algae living in there with it. And what the coral does is it sticks its tentacles out at night to feed. Are y'all with me? It seems like a lot aren't looking. The coral sticks its tentacles out at night to feed, and food is floating by little plankton in the water like we caught in our plankton nets. And these things will grab the plankton and pull it in and feed at night. And then in the daytime, this thing retreats into the shell. And the sunlight can hit the coral, the algae, and the algae will do photosynthesis. So you always find coral at shallow depths because it needs light. And if it's real deep in the water, there's no light down there. So you always find coral at shallow depths. That's why a lot of divers go to coral reefs and dive. The coral, they're not far down there. You don't have to go way down to see them. So you just go underwater 20, 30 feet. Some of them are right at the top. You can just do it with a snorkel and see these things. Now when you look at them in the daytime, these little guys aren't out. They're all retreated into the shells. So all you see is the shells in the daytime. If you were to go coral diving at night, shine a light on these things, you'd see all these tentacles sticking out of them.
Would it retract if you shine a light on it?
They probably would retract that. I don't know. We've got some video footage of
We
them.
confuse them.
But remember how I said these things can reproduce sexually or asexually. And imagine this thing budding off another little coral. A little coral here, a little baby coral kind of buds off of this one and falls off to the side and then grows right next to its daddy or mommy into another coral and produces a shell around it. Now we got 2. And then if each of those reproduces again, you'll have 4. And then 8. 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 1024, 2048, 4096, 8192, 16,384, 32,768.
Wow.
Pretty soon you have 32,768 coral. You know what that makes? Each of them with a shell around it makes a big hunk of coral. And that will keep growing and over the millennia grow into a huge coral reef that can be hundreds or even thousands of miles long. The Great Barrier Reef near Australia is thousands of miles long. And it's just coral. Not just one type. There's a whole bunch of different types. Some types like to live more shallow. Some types like to live a little deeper. Some grow flat. Some grow in branches. Some can grow on top of others. Then you have fish that come around. There are fish that can eat the coral, see? You ever seen the little parrotfish? They got bills that go real thin like this, and they can actually reach in there and eat them. And there are other fish that can chew the coral. They can chew through the shell. Parrotfish can just crunch the shell. You can hear them. I've done snorkeling with parrotfish, and you can just hear them things crunching the shell. They're just eating these things. But these things reproduce pretty quickly, so they'll come back, you see. We're going to hopefully we can Skype a guy tomorrow who is a coral expert in Hawaii. He said he could tell y'all a lot about coral. So I'm going to try to get that working. So you might have something cool to see in class tomorrow. Oh, man!
That's not fair.
Live camera of a coral reef. That would have been nice to see. I'll show you some coral video. What time's this period in? 15?
About 10.
I think it's 15.
About 12.
Scyphozoa, those are the jellyfish. And there's one. Y'all have seen these things? There are some of them that can be dangerous. Some of these things have algae living with them as well, and they can carry the algae on their on the bell. This part's called the bell. And sometimes they have algae living on the bell, and sometimes the algae provide enough food where they don't even have to sting anything, and a lot of them have lost their stings.
That's pretty cool.
Those are cool because some of those live in these big pools of thousands of them, and you can swim with them.
And you bounce off
Oh,
them?
Nemo went through it.
Nemo went, but those were stinging, weren't they?
Yes, they're definitely.
Yeah, those are stingers. There are some that don't sting. Let's see a video of jellyfish.
Deep in the oceans, before any animal trod the earth, they were here. They have flourished for over 600
It's
million
marine
years.
biology.
They inspire in us the same superstitious fear as the ocean depths themselves. Magnificent assassins, they can kill in seconds. And they can invade in mass.
That's a pool
When
of
they
the ones that don't
strike, we have
sting.
practically no defense.
Dangerous jellyfish occur everywhere, absolutely everywhere.
Yet they are not our mortal enemies. They have mysterious abilities which scientists are using to improve human health. to unlock the mysteries of cancer, aging, and genetic disease. And in astonishing new research, scientists have discovered that these primeval creatures may even hold the promise of eternal life.
What's so special about this jellyfish is its ability to overturn a fundamental principle of biology.
These accomplishments have revolutionized science, providing valuable new tools for understanding living organisms.
All of this really started by a protein that was found in a jellyfish.
There's more to this ancient enigma than meets the eye. The coast of Queensland looks like a tropical paradise. But appearances can be deceptive. Here, swimming can cost you your life. For here lurks a creature more stealthy and more deadly than any mere shark or crocodile. It is the most venomous animal in the world. This is the domain of the box jellyfish, Chironex fleckeri, also known as the sea wasp. Its tentacles are 3 meters long. They contain enough venom to kill dozens of people. The slightest brush with Chironex triggers instant, unbearable pain. Lisa Ann Gershwin is a world-renowned expert on Chironex stings and their prevention.
When Chironex stings human skin, millions and millions and millions of little tiny droplets of venom go into the skin, and they travel through the bloodstream, and very, very quickly, they do their damage.
The tentacles stick to the skin and cause an intense burning sensation. If you're lucky, you come out of your encounter with Chironex scarred for life. If you're not lucky, you'll be dead. The killer has already notched up over 70 victims.
Death happens very quickly, often in about 2 to 3 minutes. And it's amazing because it's the only thing we know of in the natural world that stops the heart in a contracted state.
We don't have those around here, luckily.
Like super small, dude.
What's that?
I heard some of them are like really small.
Small? I don't know. I thought they were about the size of my fist with long tentacles. There it is. Cubozoa, that's the box jellyfish. So there's Scyphozoa, regular jellyfish, and then Cubozoa is the box jellyfish. So I guess there's some differences between regular jellyfish and box jellyfish, so they gave them their own group, their own class. Now Hydrozoa are the hydras. And hydras are small. They're almost like coral, except they don't produce the hard shells. They often live in a colony, like this one. This is called Obelia, and it'll live in a colony. And there's a bunch of individuals that stick out of the colony. But they don't have hard shells. They have like a soft seaweed-like homes that they live in and can stick their tentacles out of. And if you've ever heard of the Portuguese man-o-war, that is a colony of hydras. The Portuguese man-o-war is not a single individual, but it's a large individual that creates the float at the top, and then thousands of individuals connected together hanging down underneath it. So if you were to look at these tentacles here of the Portuguese man-o-war, it's actually made of thousands of hydras, which are little, look kind of like these.
So it's not a jellyfish?
It's not. Portuguese man-o-war is a colony of hydras. And we have those around here, and those will sting you too. Sometimes these tentacles that hang down from the Portuguese man-o-war, these colonies that hang down, are 20, 30 feet long. And so divers can get hit with those or wrapped up in them and have been known to die from those too. But it's rare. Video of that.
Drifting along the ocean surface on a gas-filled sack, the Portuguese man of war trails a curtain of tentacles up to 100 feet long through the water. Paralyzing stingers sweep up the slow and unwary. Humans suffer severe pain. Smaller animals don't suffer for very long. They are dragged into the man of war's mouth. That's right. The man of war has more than one mouth. In fact, it has more of everything. The man of war is a colonial organism. That means it's made up of different animal types that bud from a single embryo and join together into one superorganism. Each variety of animal in a colony is called a zooid. So just imagine the aquatic equivalent of Siamese quadruplets, each of which has a specialized task. One zooid specializes in flotation. Beneath that zooid are others that specialize in eating, breeding, and hunting. Each eating zooid will digest a bit of the fish and pass the nutrients along to its other colony members. A single man of war is a deadly hunter, but men of wars are known to gather in swarms of thousands, making their part of the sea a dangerous place to be.
That is the world's weirdest, So, whoops, did I close it out?
Are you done with that?
Make sure you read chapter 14. Could be a quiz on that tomorrow.
Oh, gosh.
What do you all think?